Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's Pastor Matt back with another daily dose of defense. Now I know it's been a while since I did one of these, but I've been really busy. I just retired from the military back in December, started a new job and kind of got that off the ground and running, and have really been praying about what direction I want to go with this channel. And I was reminded by a friend of mine that my studies have been in church history and how does history impact apologetics. And what I really want to talk about then is this impact of history in apologetics. But you're probably looking at me like, really, Matt? We don't really want to study history. Now, it's important for a couple of reasons that we study history. Especially in 2021, as we see all these different offshoots of Christianity really starting to take shape and become their own thing, it becomes important for us to know what we believe, why we believe it, and where does that even come from. You'd be surprised the number of things that we believe or that other groups believe that they're not based in the Bible at all. So really there's two main reasons for studying church history. The first one is orthodoxy. Now, orthodoxy is authorized or generally accepted theory or doctrine, right? So where does our teachings come from, right? And that comes from Jude. In Jude 1, since there's only one chapter, it's hard for me to say it would be Jude chapter 2. In Jude chapter 1, verse 3, he says, "Beloved, while I was making every effort to write to you about our common salvation, I felt the necessity to write to you, appealing that you contend earnestly for the faith that was once for all time handed down to the saints." Now, I love that word, contend earnestly. It means to really to fight, to agonize over it. The word is epiagonizomai, but that's a whole nother story for a whole nother time. So he says that we need to contend earnestly for this faith that was handed down once for all to the saints. You know, what faith has been handed down from the saints? What did this look like? What did their understanding in the early church of different verses, of different contexts? You know, how did they understand the words of Jesus as they're living closer to his contextual life than we do? We don't live in first century Judea. We don't even live in second century Judea. We're not living under the Romans. We're not. So there's a lot of different things that we can pull from that first, second, third century writer and say, hey, look, this is what Jesus is talking about here. A second thing is, how were the writings of the Bible handed down? I did a whole series on the whole chain of custody of the New Testament, from the writers to the oldest surviving complete copy of the New Testament, right? And how often each book is cited, and how we can rest assured that the New Testament that we have is accurate from the New Testament that was written. The studying of church history makes it possible for us to understand how our faith came to be as it is, right? How did we get here? How did we come to these different doctrines that our churches hold to? Where do those doctrines come from? Who was the first person to espouse things like the Trinity? Now, we understand that the Trinity is taught in the Bible, but the word Trinity doesn't appear. So where does that come from? These are things that we learn through church history and through studying it and learning more about who these early believers were. So this series, a lot of it, is going to be based on what did the original church fathers believe? What did they believe? What did they write? What did they tell us? And we need to look at what was considered as orthodoxy throughout the entire history of the church. We can't just say, oh, well, this was taught by this person, so it's considered orthodoxy. Well, what was considered orthodoxy during the times of Athanasius? Oneness Pentecostalism kind of goes out the window when we look at the Athanasian Creed. When we look at historically, what did people say? How did people in the Greek context understand the Logos from John 1? And when we see that they understood that to be God, things start to fall apart rapidly. And this allows us, this understanding of the orthodoxy, and where does the orthodox teaching come from, enables us to combat bad teachings. But the second point that studying church history really teaches us is orthopraxy. Now, orthopraxy is the correct conduct, both ethical and liturgical. Right? So, how were Christians supposed to act? How was the church supposed to be run? Who was supposed to be in the lead? How were these people considered to be qualified? What was considered the right way to do business? And you say, well, we run church like this group or that group, or, well, the question isn't, are you a Presbyterian or a Pentecostal or a Baptist? The question is what did the early church fathers take as the instruction from the saints that was handed down? Right? So what did the church look like in its earliest goings? Right? We're going to take a look at that at some point. Right? How were weekly services run? How did they celebrate God when together? How did they evangelize? Because the church blew up in the 1st and 2nd centuries. It exploded until it was almost the majority in 325 when the Council of Nicaea happened. So how did that happen? How were they evangelizing? What steps and processes were they going through? And why aren't we? Then how are we missing each of the marks today with regards to running a worship service, with regards to praising God, with regards to the assembling of believers? Because we know that we're not to forsake the assembling of the believers. That's Hebrews 10, right? So this is why it's important for us to study church history. And as we look at different parts of church history, we can know what the church fathers taught. And we can trace the lineage of those teachings all the way back. So, each week what I'm going to do is in one video, just one of my videos will be based on church history. And strictly going to look at who is Jesus and what did he do? And what did his believers start to preach early in the church? And I'm going to break down a different writer each week and what were their main key points and what big things were they trying to get through. And we're going to go through each of these writers that we can find early on in the church. There's a lot of them. So, and we're going to go through the ante-Nicene fathers, and then we'll go through the Nicene fathers, and then we'll go to the post-Nicene fathers, and, then maybe we'll work our way on into more modern things. But to start with, we need to look at the early church. What did they say? What did they speak? What did they preach? And how should that impact what we believe and how we act as Christians? As always, this has been a daily dose of defense. Thank you for watching, and God bless.